yeah, Joel and I talked, and I just wanted to. I thought I'd love. I love to just BS about art and creativity and the process because everybody's is different, and I've had the good fortune. It's funny, like I'm not old, but in the industry, and I've lived primarily in the country music industry, and have only recently branched into folk a little bit and singer-songwriter because that's where I've gone creatively more over the past little while. But in the country world, and I should say country because it's like even that is a funny. What is country? There's it's like what my kid who's 21 calls country is not what I call country, and so there's actually like mainstream country, like pop country, radio country is a genre unto itself, and that's kind of where I've lived and where I came up. Because when I started, I started late. I didn't play an instrument growing up. I didn't sing growing up, and it wasn't until my son was born. I think I was 23 when he was born, and I didn't play until then. And it was after he was born that I always remember it because I stayed at home with them because I was working in the patch and I was burning out and I just needed some time off. So my wife went back to work and I stayed home. And I remember one day I was sitting around watching TV and there was a music documentary came on, and I don't even remember what it was, but it was black and white, I remember, and it showed, it was filming the band backstage pre-show, and it was a big band. And then the cameras were showing all the camaraderie and the hype of it, and then the cameras followed the band on stage. And when the cameras panned to that shot, I went, that's what I'm meant to do. I need to figure out how to do that. And I remember my wife came home from work and I was just jazzed because it was like, I had a revelation. This is what I'm gonna do. And she's looking at me like, what do you mean? You don't have a guitar. I'm like, I know, but I feel it, and this is what I'm supposed to do. And from that moment on, with everything that I did, I just intentionally moved towards it. And so bought a guitar, started taking lessons, started writing, and when I started writing, I think, how many people have written a song? Has everybody written a song? Okay, so it was funny because I encourage you then that like if you've written a song, you're a songwriter, period. It doesn't matter if you've written a crappy song, one song, 1,000 songs, you're a songwriter, and that is cool. And my son told me that when we talked this week, we were talking creativity, and I forget sometimes, but he's like, Dad, you're a songwriter. Like, that's cool. And I was like, oh yeah. And then I thought about it even just sharing tonight that like, if you've written a song, you're a songwriter, and that's awesome. So yeah, I just started with everything I did. Every decision I made was moving towards this goal of getting on the radio. I wanted to be on the radio, and I wanted to play on big stages. And so it really wasn't about art or anything creative at the time. It was, if I'm honest, I was like, I want to be famous. It was the driving force. And so, but I started learning the basics, and then I just started it when we first start to write, or when we first engage, even whether it's playing or whatever it is we do creatively. I know for me, I think we emulate first, and we take the artists that we love and we just try to emulate them because we don't really know. I didn't know what I wanted or who I was, and so for me, it was Cor Blund and Johnny Cash. Those were the artists that I listened to all the time and were the first artists that I tried to emulate. So I would just try to play like them, write like them, and it wasn't until years later that I kind of started to find my own voice a little bit. And for the first long stretch, I almost like I didn't really do it. I don't know, I guess I was creative, but like the whole point of the Boom Chaka Boys, when we started, we were a dance band and like a kind of a rockabilly, high tempo bar band. And so everything we wrote was to either keep people drinking, keep people dancing, or to have a good time. It really wasn't about saying anything or trying to be anything. It was just like good times. That was it. And so I spent years writing just banging out songs. And it was also because we were part of that country music scene and that radio country music scene, everything we did was also trying to align with getting on the radio. And so that's like a really specific kind of writing and a specific kind of creativity that I value and I appreciate so much, because I do believe, even though it gets a bad rap, it's a craft in itself to be able to write that stuff. Like that real poppy, hooky, even if it doesn't say anything, you can't stop thinking about it. And I'm thankful that I'm not doing much of that anymore, because I've, even in the past couple of years, just started to find my voice a little bit and my actual voice. And so one thing that I do believe is that I do believe every song, no matter the time it was written, the level of the writer, the gender, the genre, anything, there's two things basically they have in common. And that is every idea starts with inspiration. Every song starts with inspiration. And then sometimes it takes a really long time for inspiration to find its voice. Sometimes it happens really fast. But the second thing is that inspiration finds lyric and melody and a voice, and then a song is born. And that's across all things, I think. And you know, even if you're writing in a office-like setting, which is what Nashville is, where you're just writing, everything you write still has, there's still an inspiration in it. And so this first song was inspired, that hit me. It was almost 35 years ago. I grew up very close to my grandparents in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, which is where I spent the first years of my life. And my grandparents had an old cabinet record player and a stack of vinyl. And so I had me and my three younger brothers. We'd spend so much time at my grandparents' place. And we'd often get, when it was time for the grandparents and my parents to play cards and smoke cigarettes, we'd get shoved into the living room, and we would just start putting records on. And we would just listen. We didn't even know we were listening to, but we learned all, like Willie Nelson, Harry Belafonte. I remember Engelbert Humperdinck. I remember reading the name and being like, that's weird. And then one day, and this, I remember it, and it set my course. I picked up Will the Circle Be Unbroken Volume 2, and I remember, I didn't know what it was at the time, but when I dropped the needle and I heard, I was standing by my window on one cold and cloudy day when I saw that hearse come rolling, Lord, to carry my mother away. Will the circle be unbroken? And I didn't know it at the time, but my course had been set. And it was 35 years later. My grandparents had just passed, and I was sitting around thinking about that. And that moment of inspiration became this song. And so I wrote it. And it's about all the songs that make up our lives. And so all the verses are basically song titles. And I remember this one, when it hit, it came hard and fast. It just came out, and it was the title track to my kind of debut full band solo album. It's called As It Was a Song. Will the circle be unbroken in my grandma's living room? That's the way the world goes round when my daddy got to choose. New Orleans is sinking in my family's four-door Ford. Amazing Grace at St. Joe's Church when we met to praise the Lord. It was a song, it was a song. Through the good times and the bad, it was a song. When the angels come to pick me up and they ask me how it was, I'll spread my wings, look them in the eye and say it was a song. Rock and roll on Friday, Sunday morning coming down. Mama tried in Folsom when the family gathered round. Let's get it on for loving, don't back down for a fight. Dancing in the dark is how I saw the light. It was a song, it was a song. Through the good times and the bad, it was a song. When the angels come to pick me up and they ask me how it was, I'll spread my wings, look them in the eyes and say it was a song. We've all got a story, a soundtrack to our lives, where memory and harmony collide. It was a song, it was a song. Through the good times and the bad, it was a song. When the angels come to pick me up and they ask me how it was, I'll spread my wings, look them in the eye and say it was a song, it was a song. Through the good times and the bad, it was a song. When the angels come to pick me up and they ask me how it was, I'll spread my wings, look them in the eye and say it was a song. Yeah, it was a song. Thank you. So I did want to I kind of wanted to, I'll sing, after I sing a song, if something strikes you about it, or you have a question or something you're like, oh, what's that about? Then just feel free to shout it out. I think it's much talking collaboratively about creativity is a lot easier than just one person dumping. So anything that you, if there's ever anything, just shout it out.
Well, number one, do you write the music first or the lyric first? Or are you doing collaboratively?
I would say that in the past, it was normally always lyric first. When I was taught to write, when I went to Nashville and learned the craft of that kind of writing, I learned to write from title out. So everything started with a title. And so, because when in Nashville and in that factory writing system, it's like the hook matters most, and the title is the hook, generally, right? In popular music, that's the thing you sing over and over again. So it would start with, we would get a title and then work to fill it.
That's interesting, because a book is the opposite, right? Isn't it? Like
I think so.
Like a book is like you write the book and then, you know, you stew over the title while you're writing. So it's kind of the opposite.
It is, and it's. I think that the title thing is a very specific way, because I talk to lots of young writers who they'll share something with me, and I'll say, "That's incredible. What's the title?" And they're like, "I don't know." And I'm like, "What do you mean you don't know? Like, it's the most. It's like so important. That's the thing I'm going to think about." But yeah. So in Nashville, it was title based, and then I've never been. I'm definitely a lyric first, as far as I think what my talent lies in is lyric over melody. I've never, because I started playing so late, and so I've never been very clever on the guitar. I've never had. I can hear melody, but I don't like come up with great melodies often, or like maybe not great's the wrong word, but unique melodies. And so, which is okay, because my whole creative life I've collaborated. So the majority of the things that I have written are co-written. So, because again, that's how I learned to write. And I met with the Boom Chukka boys. I met Joel Rathjen was his name, and we wrote the songs, and he had an incredible gifting for melody. Like, he was just a phenomenal guitar player, and I just remember we would sit around coming up with ideas, and then all of a sudden he'd be playing some B7 sus jazzy thing and I was just like, wow, like it would just elevate something. And so, I'm definitely lyric first.
So once you've got your lyrics, how do you go out picking the melody and the tune for it? Like, you've got the words
Yeah.
now, how do you do the rest?
Well, I don't write. Well, I don't get a lot of lyric done before I find a melody. So I don't write a whole lyric without a melody. But I will have my basic lyric. And then it's just, I mean, like I said, when I first started playing, this is all I could do. And I didn't even learn how to play like an old C. I was just taught to play like a D2, an E minor, and a G. That's it. And then the guy who taught me guitar literally taught me those four, because those four chords you barely have to move your fingers, right? You can just, and they were like real. I started playing in church, and those were like, church songs were just like that. And so I learned to play those four chords, and then honestly, the guitar teacher's like, okay, you know those four chords, here's a capo, you're good. Like, for what I wanted. He's like, you're good. You can play any song you want now, like any song, pretty much, and you can write any song you want with that. Just move it up and down the neck if you want a different key. And so I just would take, if I came up with a lyric, I would just take what I knew and just play, and then see what, how it found its way. And so,
were there other writers that you worked with that would do that, would write their lyrics entirely first and then?
Yeah, I know lots of people who are like have entire songs written. Yeah, and yeah, it's almost like poets. And then when I go into session, if I go into a songwriting session with them, they'll be like, I have this whole lyric thing, and then we'll just work on a melody or try to find something that works. So I like to kind of do them once I find my footing and kind of where I'm going, I do like to do them both kind of at the same time, because I write better if I can hear like where it's going. So like I like to hear like, okay, I know that I want a B rhyme on the G chord. And so if I hear that and we get that even bass line, the melody, then I write better because I can hear it. When my most recent trip to Nashville, which has been 4 years ago now, or 3 years ago, I found it really difficult because I hadn't been writing that way, like just go in and an hour and a half later you have a song. And one of the ways that they're writing now is they don't even hold the guitar. They almost just, it's just like constant dumping stuff into basically a document, and then they don't really take time to worry about the melody, or so I remember just sitting in a room just like feeling completely overwhelmed because I had an idea and I had a melody and a title or a lyric, but they just moved so fast through it, it didn't matter. And then they're like, we'll figure it out at the end. And I found that really challenging to not have a map of some kind. So the guy that taught me in Nashville, his name is Byron Hill. He's a legend down there. I think he has 6 or 7 number ones, but if you're like, he wrote Born Country for Alabama. He wrote George Strait's first number 1 hit, Foolhardy Memory. And just like it's just an incredible CV of music. And he welcomed Joel and I in and mentored us. And that's where we learned I learned a lot about like not being so precious with stuff because it moved so fast, and the goal of the game down there was almost quality over or quantity over quality is a bad way of putting it, but like more songs in the hopes that one song is a hit instead of stewing over one thing for a long time. And so I remember we went, and I was so excited. Obviously, I'd never been, and I couldn't believe I was there. And we sit down, and he kind of lays things out like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We start at 10:30 every morning. I'll have a pot of coffee on, and come with titles. That was it. Like, come with titles or like real strong statements, and then we're going to write till 12:30. Then we're going to take a long lunch. Then we're going to come back, and we're going to write for 2 more hours, and then we're going to call it a day. And we're going to write 2 songs a day every day. And I remember being like, how is that even possible? And but all of a sudden, I'm in there, and now obviously he's very successful, and so he taught us the flow of you just don't dwell too long on anything, because you can always edit. But it was like, let's just get, and it was like, and then he's like, it's not that hard. It's a verse. It's like 2 verses, a chorus, a bridge, and that's it. He's like, the song doesn't need to be longer than 3 minutes, and all these things. And I'm just like, what do you mean? That's not how Leonard Cohen did it, or whatever. He's like, but that's what we're here writing. We're looking for a hit, and we're looking for radio. And so that's something I really learned. And so when I talk to new writers or encouraging writers, I think it's really important to know why you're writing, because it relieves a lot of pressure if you're just writing something for you, or like if you're just writing for your heart. It's actually not that hard, because there's no walls that you have to fit. But then if you're and I've told so many young or up and coming artists, I'm like, if you want songs on the radio, you have to write a certain way. Like, it's just the way it is. It's math, it's science. And but one of the songs we wrote on the first, I can't remember if it was the first, I think it might have been the second trip down. So anyways, we spent 5 days at a time, and we would write 10 songs every 5 days. And like, I thought they were all freaking amazing because I had never done that. I'm like, oh my God, this is a hit. And then, we recorded whatever, like a fraction of them. But I remember one day we were kind of stuck on we were just stuck a little bit. And then Byron goes into his office, and he comes out, and he has this giant Ziploc bag full of pieces of paper. And he's like, these are titles and ideas that I've collected over years and years, and I just put them in this bag, and then when this happens, I get the bag, and we're just going to start pulling pieces of paper. I'm going to read them, and if something pops or something hits, then we're writing it. And I'm like, that's cool. Like, I kind of still do that today now. And so we're sitting around, and he's pulling stuff, and we're like, nothing's popping. And then he pulls one out, and it says, "The Book of Who I Am." And all three of us kind of went like something. We're like, that's cool. Like, didn't even know why it was cool. We just thought it sounded, deep, heavy. And so he's like, okay. And so we sat down, and an hour and 15 minutes later, wrote this song. And I remember, we'll talk after, but I remember Byron not even really understanding like the biblical reference in it or anything. He's like, I don't know, it just sounds cool. Like, it was just, we were just moving it along in a way because that's what we had to do. But all I know is I remember after the hour and a half, we cut the demo, and I remember just getting so emotional in the demo booth because I'm like, I can't believe I'm doing this. It was like one of those moments when, I was like, I can't believe I'm down here and I'm doing this. And this is the only song that I've ever written that got pitched to a major artist, and it got pitched to Kenny Rogers, and because Byron knew Kenny, and it was this whole, and it didn't get cut, but that would have been sweet. This is called The Book of Who I Am. It's on the first Boom Chukka Boys album. Sometimes I've got to put some miles on my wheels, get out on the highway and remember how it feels. Meet some brand new faces, shake a stranger's hand. Chapters in my story, the book of who I am. I stood up on a mountain and looked out on the sea. I've realized how insignificant a man can be. But I found some inspiration, some meaning to the plan. Chapters in my story, the book of who I am. I've read the book of John till the pages fell apart. Words intended for the common man. And as I make my way, I know it won't be easy. I'm hoping someday heaven will understand the book of who I am. There's more to my story than pages about me. There's love lost and found again, and a few old broken dreams. There's friends who've stood beside me, and some who've turned and ran. Chapters in my story, the book of who I am. I've read the book of John till the pages fell apart. words intended for the common man. And as I make my way, I know it won't be easy. I'm hoping someday heaven will understand the book of who I am. Oh, oh, and as I make my way, I know it won't be easy. I'm hoping someday heaven will understand the book of who I am. The book of who I am. The book of who I am. Thank you.
I
Yeah.
noticed you were finger picking on that one.
Yeah,
You
that's new.
finger pick, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because when we do our sessions on Sunday,
Yeah.
I try to teach them or instruct them in a manner that they learn something new.
Yeah.
And finger picking was one of the things that we did that generally is not thought of unless you're taking classical guitar.
Yeah, so my hero is ultimately my musical hero is John Prine. And so I think he's the greatest lyricist ever. And also I love that's why he fingers that Travis picking style, finger picking. And so like I said, when I first learned, this is all I knew how to do. But it was during COVID that I was like sitting at home doing nothing, and I thought, you know what? It's time. I want to try to be a better writer, and I want to get inspired. So I found somebody to give me lessons online on how to do this kind of picking, and so I spent a couple months just practicing like crazy to figure it out. And I haven't gotten very clever with it. I'm still sticking to the basics, but it has opened up a whole world of writing and playing, because now I actually like to play. Like before, when all you can do is just like, I got bored. I'm like, well, like, and I've never played electric. I've never wanted to play electric, so I never got into any lead stuff. So, man, like learning to just do this, because when I pick up a guitar now and I play that, I actually like what it sounds like, and I'm like, I feel a little bit like John Prine, and I'm like, it is just, yeah, it's so gentle, it's so much ease to it. That song, so Book of Who I Am, was saying about the Byron, when it says, I read the book of John until the pages fell out, words intended for a common man. I think we came up with the John lyric, and both Joel and I, who had grown up in the church, were like, yeah, that's perfect, like John 3:16, and all of a sudden he's like, I don't care. Like, he didn't know, he wasn't, so he's just like, he just thought it sounded good. It didn't, and it's like, yeah, it was just really interesting. But that's one of the few songs that I still play in my shows. But on the album, the musicality on the album, that album is incredible, because we had like the best session players in Nashville play on that album. And I listened to this song today back, and I hate my voice, because obviously it was a long time ago, and that's what we do, we judge ourselves. But just the musicality, because it's just like incredible. But it wasn't written, well, I guess it was a little bit of this style, but it came back to life to me learning how to play it like this, because then I can just play with just by myself, and I think it sounds pretty, right? Yeah, and then even when you talk about, so I I guess another thing in the little tip, I've always been very aware of my strengths and weaknesses as a player and as a singer. And so like even when I started taking lessons to finger pick or to do this style of picking, my teacher, he wanted me to like do the I don't even know what you call it, but like this, go through the G scale, G, A minor, B minor, C, D, E minor, D over F sharp, G, and play over and over. But he wanted me to go through like, do G, A, B, C, D, E. And I just said I told him, I'm like, honestly, man, I'm never gonna play in any of those shapes. So he wanted me to learn all the shapes. And I said, I only ever play in C shape, G shape, and D sometimes. But I love C shape. And so I can play in D, I just capo on 2 and play in C shape. And I just love the shape of it. It allows me to do things that I feel fancy with that I can't do in the D shape. And, but.
Did you go with one finger picking style, like one?
Yeah, so the only thing I learned was I started with, he made me just do that for, and then just switch chords. And then he's like, and then once and then he's like, okay, then add. Which now I actually find harder to do than just, because I got used to the flow, but I just kept adding, but it was just that basic. Yeah. And then I do this a little bit now where I do kind of a style. And then I've tried to get a little fancy with, but that's the same. It's the same thing.
Started off with one.
I just started with one. Yeah. Yeah. But if you think about like even that, like that's pretty, right? Like even just that, and then just go. You could write a song with just that, right? Like it's just pretty. And well, that'll segue to what I wanted to, because I think that we beat our, obviously if you're here, you're creative, I'm guessing, or you're interested in being, but we beat ourselves up because, I'm not whatever, I'm not John Prine, or I'm not this person or that person, but that it's just like, I can't remember who I heard. There's a book I highly recommend by a producer. And do you guys know who Rick Rubin is? Evan, you might. Yeah, so he's one of the most legendary producers in the world. And he was I can't believe it, but he was part of Beastie Boys when they started, and then he came up in that world, but then in the hip hop world. But he's the one that like reinvented Cash with all the American recording stuff. He did all of that, and that was him. And then he's incredible. But he's basically
What's his name again?
Rick Rubin, and he's basically kind of become a bit of a spiritual guru about creativity. And so he released a book a couple of years ago called what is it called? A creative way of being, and it's basically like it's so wonderful to read because it's just like little snippets about his philosophy on creativity and art, and he talks about how if you like something and that's enough. Like it starts and ends there. If you write something and you like it, then it's worthy of being sung or shared. And I know for so long I didn't believe that, and I would beat myself up. But in the past couple of years specifically, I've really thankfully had it opened up to the idea that like if I write something and I like to sing it, chances are somebody else will like to hear it. It may be 4 people, but if I like singing it, there's value in it. And so I stopped beating myself up so much about trying to be different than where I'm at right now. And so where I've been the last 18 months, 2 years, has been with this picking style and real basic stuff, like real no GCD minor. And it was about 2 months ago, I was out. My son is a songwriter and a creative. He lives in Vancouver. He turns 21 in September, and so I was out visiting him, and he has an awesome pad in just off of downtown, and he was working, and so I had the day to myself, and I was like, okay, like it was beautiful, sunny, and it was like a perfect day to write. I'm like, oh man, I had the house to myself. I was in Vancouver, and so I made a good cup of coffee, and I was like, okay, I've been doing the same thing over and over again. It felt like I've been doing the same thing. I'm like, I'm gonna get saucy. I'm gonna get creative here, or not creative. I'm gonna get different. I'm gonna try to come up with something new. And so I like grabbed my guitar and I was just like trying to get the vibe going, and then I just like, okay, first thing that comes to mind, I just went, and I just started doing this. And I'm like, screw it, it feels so good. And then I'm like, you know what? I don't have to try to be something I'm not. Like I can just rest in what I am doing right now, and then it's funny because I don't. Also, the other thing, my kid plays in all these weird tunings, never standard tuning, and so do a lot of my friends play in like Dad Gad or Open D or Open C or all these open tunings, and I just have never. I kind of have never really wanted to. And also I just haven't had the time to learn them properly. But I'm like, I don't know, standard tuning. Like it's been that way for a long time for a reason, especially for the acoustic guitar. So then I started picking, and then the first lyric that popped into my mind was 6 strings in a standard tuning, flat top guitar, sturdy as they come. Same old song, slightly altered melody. There ain't nothing much new under the sun. Leather boots, 8-inch over ankle, laced high and tight, sturdy as they come. Mile after mile, dirt road or highway, there ain't nothing much new under the sun. Still I sing, still I play, hoping on the hope that better days will come. 6 strings in a standard tuning, ain't nothing much new under the sun. Two hearts, twice broken, gotta love, sturdy as they come, perfect in its imperfection. There ain't nothing much new under the sun. Still I sing, still I play, hoping on the hope that better days will come. 6 strings in a standard tuning. Ain't nothing much new under the sun. 6 strings in a standard tuning. Open for another day under the sun. Yeah. So I just didn't beat myself up, and I just let that come out, and I'm like, yeah, it's pretty basic, I guess, but I really feel it when I sing it, and it's like, it just is like you don't have to, you can just do whatever you, right? And that song, I do a lot of this when it comes, even just like as far as shape and style. When I generally play a D over F sharp, so like I rarely play a straight D shape. I started doing just always playing the D over F sharp, and that's something that I just do all the time. And I stick, because when I finger pick, obviously I use this as my root. So even when I do C, I play that note. The dominant, yeah. And so I just like it. But that's a way to spice up a little D. Is I love the D over F sharp. How to do the play the D up here, or not? Is it that one? Or is it? Yeah. Hold on. There we go. He taught me that one. So then you can just, because I'm getting bored, and my buddy plays all those weird. He never plays anything normal. Like it's always, and he's incredible. But and so I want to be able to slide, because then you can just go from the C right to the D, and it's awesome. So even when you're picking, it's really fun. What was I wanting to do?
When you write, obviously you write
Oh, here we go.
for your voice too, though, right?
Yeah, for
So
sure.
You're writing in a key that you can
Yeah.
sing comfortably.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we find difficult, I think, when we're learning
That would be hard.
somebody else's song.
Yeah.
And
Well, especially if you're
trying to sing to it well, it's not that simple.
especially if you're trying to learn, like, I don't know, I remember trying to learn Springsteen songs, and I'm like, I can't do any of his songs in his chords. And I'm like, well, yeah, you're not Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah.
No doubt you can't. But that is, and so when I go into co-writes, some guys don't do this, or men and women don't do this, but I do. I like to be like, who are we writing for in this session? Because if it's me, then there's keys that I like and can use well. And then also that really helps shape the song, because if it's for a young 18-year-old female artist, that's a different song than it is if we're writing for something for me. And so I like to have that when I do co-writing. It's like, who are we writing for? And sometimes it's just like, let's just write like to pitch it. Let's just write something to pitch. And then we don't really worry too much about key or anything. But that's the nice thing about the capo, is keep going up until it hits my vocal range.
Do you find you change that quite a bit through writing a song? Like as you're writing it, do you change your capo position and try again?
I do, yeah, lots. Because if I've grown into, I'm not a pure baritone, but I've grown into my lower register over the past number of years, and I like living in there. I used to, I still can. I used to I could belt, and so I could do I could get up pretty high in the choruses if I belted, but I don't do it. I just don't do a lot of that anymore. And so I like living down in the low. So the capo allows me to find that perfect blend between verse and then where the chorus needs to go, where you can find that, like I actually, when I talk about, I don't do any different tunings. I have actually in the past year started doing a little bit of writing in open, like tuning down a full step, because B is a great key for me. And so I was playing up on the fourth capo and doing the G shape a lot, but then you always have that high sounding guitar. But if you tune your guitar down a full step and play in C, that's B, right? Yes, it is.
Half a step, yeah.
Yeah. So you get like a whole, I was able to like live in that in a lower register and have the guitar sound as beefy. Like I love do you guys know who Coulter Wall is? If you haven't listened to him, same, like depending on the style of music you love, but he's a young guy from Swift Current who's become a mega star, but he's like true Western, like true prairie Western music. It's incredible. But he does a lot of